Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about the movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to MovieFilm. It's episode 290. My name is Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall, nursing a bit of a head cold.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going, Zachy? So are you, I think, right?
You and me both, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know what's... I would say it's the season for that, but is it the season for that?
I don't know. You know, I was feeling like my allergies flaring up recently, I think, because it's really windy where I'm at and, you know, everything getting kicked off the trees and whatnot. But yeah, I was surprised to wake up today to a sore throat and all that fun. So actually, I have a cough drop in my mouth. I'm going to do my best not to click it around when I talk. So how are you feeling?
You know, I've been fighting something for a couple weeks, but I'll tell you, I am dedicated to dropping this episode no matter what.
Oh, agreed. I mean, this was like the only time we could make this work this week, and we are here because we care.
Well, it's remember in Air Force One when the terrorists are about to storm the cockpit and you have the pilot, he's like, no matter what, we land this plane.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's us. Although the metaphor is not apt because, in fact, the pilots end up dead and the plane does not land. But
that's right.
Our intentions are good.
Yeah.
So
wow, I didn't even think about that. That's kind of sad. He was so committed and it didn't work
out. Anyway, what have you been up to? What have you been watching?
Well, yeah, I've seen a few things. We've done some commentaries in the past couple of weeks, so this is a little bit of catch up here for me. But okay, Zachy.
Yeah.
There's this wacky independent movie that's been getting a little bit of buzz lately, and I'm curious if you've heard of it. It's called Hundreds of Beavers.
Sounds like my Google search history.
Yeah, it's so funny because it is a little bit of a randy title, I suppose, for a very, very innocent movie. Hundreds of Beavers. I had seen people talking about this online and just falling over themselves, loving this weird movie that they're like, it's impossible to describe. And I was like, all right, I was on that alone. I was like, I'll go to the theater. I'll go see this. But it was kind of hard to find. The reason for that is this movie was made for $150,000.
Wow.
By some friends in Wisconsin. And they have personally released it. I don't know how. I don't know where they've raised the money. Put it out into theaters, into festivals. And I think it just recently got picked up. So now it's in a handful of theaters across the country, but it is available on streaming, which is where I checked it out. And this movie, it's not difficult to describe, but it's difficult, I think, to make people understand.
Okay.
Which I would say what it is it is literally a feature-length long Looney Tunes cartoon.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes, there's no dialogue. It is strictly about this down on his luck salesman who falls in love with a fur trapper's daughter, and the fur trapper says, or he's a fur trapper, sorry, and then a guy who purchases furs, he says, the only way you can date my daughter is if you get me hundreds of beavers. He doesn't literally say this because, like I said, there's no dialogue. So anyway, this whole movie then is this guy in these Wile E. Coyote type situations trying to kill beavers, and the beavers are played by people in beaver costumes. So like they're 6 foot tall, like Six Flags Great America characters looking beavers.
Okay.
And it's just, I mean, literally the movie is scenario after scenario after scenario about how to use his wits to try to capture these beavers. And what's fun about it is he makes a lot of mistakes at the beginning, but as he goes along, he learns something from each mistake until, he finally gets to the end and he starts catching beavers. But there's also wolves out there that he has to work against. And by the end, he's learned so many things that he finally starts to get good at it, and it ends up with him basically infiltrating this beaver compound. And there's like a beaver NASA, and there's like I realize this sounds crazy. This is literally what the movie is like. It is so weird and so wacky and so fun. If I had one note, I would say they probably could have easily ripped about 15 minutes out of it, because I think it's an hour and 50 minutes.
Wow.
And it does not need to be that long. I think it almost starts to feel a little exhausting by the end for that reason. I think 90 minutes would have been like a sweet spot. But all that said, when it started and the guy was like, and just like, no talking, cutting, using a saw to cut holes into ice, on a lake and then falling through. I was like, oh, this is charming. Like, I'm not quite sure what all the mega buzz was about for this, but as it goes along, you start to get on its wavelength. And it was just so inventive and charming and hilarious. And it's in this, it looks like it's an old black and white movie. It has that kind of flicker to it, and graininess. And, obviously, like a ton of After Effects for these really madcap, like I say, Looney Tunes style type of action that happens. I don't think this will be for everyone. I think I'd say check out the trailer, and if it looks like I could not watch a feature length of that, you're probably right. But if you're like taken with the craft of it, the filmmaking, you get charmed by the trailer. I think people are going to have a good time with it. And I feel like this is going to become like a midnight cult classic kind of thing, where I can only imagine being in a theater filled with people, just how hilarious it would be just getting to laugh along with everybody. So wacky movie, but Hundreds of Beavers. I was totally charmed by it. I was very charmed by even just the story of it. The people literally going out into the snow. I guess they filmed it over 2 winters in Wisconsin, and 12 weeks total, $150,000, and they made this crazy movie. At the end of the day, I was glad I watched it, but I could imagine some people being like, wow, it's still going. So I just throw that out there. I say, check out the trailer, see for yourself. And
caveat emptor.
Yeah. So that was fun. Watch that at home. But a couple of weeks ago, I went to the theater to go catch out the latest Guy Ritchie joint. Man,
I wanted to see this.
Yeah. Well, I bring it up today because it actually came out on streaming today. Yeah, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which is basically, I'll read the IMDb summary. It's the British military recruits a small group of highly skilled soldiers to strike against German forces behind enemy lines during World War II. And apparently this was a covert Winston Churchill ordained mission that was confidential until like 2015 or 2016, which is kind of cool. And I have to say, when I saw the trailer, I couldn't help but be amused because they keep saying like true story, just released to the public and this amazing World War II mission. But it's all these, it's like very wacky and Guy Ritchie and kind of Tarantino-esque. And I was trying to picture if the people who actually went on this mission, these probably in real life very buttoned up people, where it was like, hey,
Right.
we made a movie about that mission you did. Like, oh, quite good. Let's see how we did. I believe we fared quite well. And then they just see Henry Cavill just being like, ha, knock, knock, F you, with like a machine gun. If they would be like, what is this?
That's
that kind of was, and I thought that actually a lot during the movie as well. All that said, totally fun, kind of like TNT Saturday afternoon movie. Like very, very violent, charming, it's like Carrie Elways and Henry Cavill being like, yes, we will kill many Nazis. Like a lot of like,
pip, pip.
Exactly. Well, it's sort of like, smug, fun, smirky, let's go get those Nazis. Yeah. Hey boy, kind of thing.
Kind of.
And,
so not quite as hardcore as Inglourious Bastards, it sounds like.
Not as hardcore as that, no. And I prefer Inglourious Bastards personally.
Sure.
This is, like I said, this is like a TNT Saturday afternoon romp. kind of film.
Mhm.
And I must admit, when the actual mission was being carried out in the third act, I did have a brief moment where I was like, I wonder what the Steven Spielberg version of this would have been.
Interesting.
Like a little bit more into like the facts and sort of the tension. There's not a lot of tension in this. There's just a ton of machine gun fire, and our guys never get hit and everyone else does, which is fun in its own way. But part of me wondered what that sort of, a little bit more historically accurate sort of Spielberg-y sort of version of it would have been.
Yeah.
Having said that, this is definitely like something, if this sounds interesting to you, like, I think it's worth streaming. Like, it's just a 2-hour World War II romp. Which, even saying that, I feel a little bad for people who experienced World War II. It's a romp.
It's a romp.
But it is. I mean, so take it up with Guy Ritchie. But Cavill's great. It's Carrie Elwes is great. All the people in it. Yeah. I if you check it out, I'll be very curious what you think.
I feel bad for Henry Cavill because I just feel like he's a leading man in search of something that lets him break through.
I know, that's the thing, right? This movie didn't really have an impact.
Yeah.
And I kind of can't say I'm surprised. I mean, this is really for people that are going to enjoy this sort of thing, and I don't think it's a mass appeal kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it like a $200 million kind of thing? Which is,
well, and we'll be talking later in the episode of
yes,
movies spending way too much. Well, I looked up the budget. It says $60 million.
Oh, this? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Maybe I'm confusing it with something else.
Argyle cost $200 million.
I think I had that in my head because of Cavill.
Because of Cavill. So $60 million seems like what you want to spend on something.
That's
like this.
perfect. That's like chef's kiss.
Right?
Yeah. It still didn't perform the way that they wanted, but I do feel like that you could feel good about yourself at the end of the day.
Right. But I mean, yeah, as of now, it's taken in about $19 million.
Holy cow. Really? That bad? But I mean, when you factor in all the streaming services and worldwide licensing, I'm sure it's not going to probably be hugely profitable, but
right.
It'll have things covered. I don't know.
Ugh. Well, speaking of profitable, I don't know what it says about me that I fully bought into the entirely manufactured holiday that is May the 4th.
Hey, no, I love it.
For the last few years, I don't know when it really became a thing.
Yeah.
That you have Star Wars fans, pretty much we have like Orthodox Star Wars fans, they still celebrate on May 25th.
Yes, because that's the day that A New Hope came out in 1977.
Was released originally, but I think pretty much May the 4th, because May the 4th be with you, waka waka. That's become kind of right, and I'm kind of, because I still see people bitch and moan about this online, and I'm like, you know what? It's just a pew pew movie, and you can just enjoy it, Like,
wait, moaning about what? The date discrepancies, or just the
like
fact
this is a Hallmark holiday or whatever,
That's funny.
And again, I've said this to you before, Brian. No one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans.
To quote Metallica, sad but true.
And so, it's become kind of a thing now where Disney puts out Star Wars related announcements, and this year, they re-released The Phantom Menace into the theaters. Last year, they re-released The Return of the Jedi into the theaters.
Man, I can't believe that was a year ago. I still remember how much fun that was.
It was a blast.
Big screen.
Yeah. Of course, it's called Return of the Jedi, not The Return of the Jedi. I don't know why I added the.
That's funny.
Don't judge me. Anyway, this past weekend it was fun for me because the San Francisco Symphony had announced their schedule way back last fall, and they were going to do The Empire Strikes Back screening along with the symphony over May the 4th weekend. So like way back in November, December, I bought tickets for me and the family, all the boys. to go see it. I was like, oh, it's a great experience. And I got to tell you, Brian, I don't know. I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but The Empire Strikes Back, I love this movie so much.
Right?
It's just so effing good.
This is the only thing I'll say because I want to hear more about your experience, but I, within the last half a year, got to see Empire Strikes Back at the Chinese theater on the
you got like the
screen.
IMAX experience, right?
Dude, I almost like teared up.
Yeah.
I was so taken with it.
Yeah.
And just reminded again, not only that I love Star Wars and that I love, The Empire Strikes Back, but like you said, it's that good.
Yeah.
That movie is that good.
I was literally about to say the same thing. It reminds you why you love Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, just the chance to see it on the big screen again. Last time I saw it was back in 97 at the special edition. And then the great thing with seeing the symphony perform is every note of that music so well that for me the fun is the little variation, like it's slightly different. To remind you, you're hearing it live, but it was just great, and the crowd was so into it. I mean, it was just packed to the rafters. People were applauding at the right moments. People were clapping. The entire crowd cringed when Leia kisses Luke. It was like, no,
right.
Just such a great experience. So that was like Friday, and then on Sunday, I took the boys to The Phantom Menace, which is back in theaters now, 25 years later. And I was thinking about how The Phantom Menace is now older than the original trilogy was when The Phantom Menace came out.
Unbelievable. A quarter of a century.
Right?
Unbelievable.
It opened in second place. The re-release of The Phantom Menace opened in second place at the national box office. I
was going to say, I think that's, second place, and the movie that opened in first last week was behind it. Yeah. That's how well it did. That's pretty amazing.
So that was great. I about 10 minutes in, I got tired. And I was like, oh, I gotta stay awake. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is The Phantom Menace. I know when this gets exciting. So I took a nap for
You're kidding.
No, that's true. So I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna take a nap for like half an hour. And then I woke up, right before the pod race, I felt refreshed, and so I had a great experience.
Dude, that is amazing. Well, I was going to ask how it played, but I guess.
I mean, look, I want to acknowledge that I had a lot of good feelings revisiting this film.
Yeah.
Now, just to be clear, Brian, it's not the magnificent Empire Strikes Back.
Swerve.
But it took me back to when that movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me happy. Doesn't it? I mean, when I don't know about you, when I think back to Phantom Menace, the release, it's for me, it's just as much about everything surrounding it and all the seeing the toys and just everything that existed around its release.
Oh man. I mean, it was, now we get Star Wars television shows. We have more Star Wars movies, but that was after the original trilogy. We thought that was locked.
Mm-hmm.
It was done. And that we were getting a new one, and the mystery of it and the excitement and the anticipation. I mean, it was huge.
It was. And what you realize is that particular thing is something no one else will ever have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we got to have something really special with that movie.
Totally.
And so when I watch it now, yes, there's the nap time. But there's also what it felt like sitting down and seeing that crawl for the first time and hearing Duel of the Fates and just the all the stuff that felt brand new. And the one thing I have to say I really appreciate about that movie now is it looks, and I don't mean in terms of the effects and stuff, I mean the aesthetic. It looks completely different from any of the other ones.
In what way?
Like the whole, the whole design approach, Doug Chang and all these people, they said, we're treating it like a Star Wars period picture.
Mm.
Right. And in terms of the ornate architecture and stuff of Naboo and everything, I mean, it's really different,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And by virtue of the fact that it was shot on film, it looks completely different from the other two prequels.
That's true. And I do feel like I don't know for sure with Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, but it does feel a little more tactile than those.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, in my mind, Attack of the Clones is very, like, a lot is filled in with computers.
Very much so.
Like the arena and all those sorts of things. But Phantom Menace, I actually think of desert, and I know those are artificial locations, but the pod race just feels very, I don't know, visceral, right?
Yeah.
Unlike some of the other stuff.
Yeah, and again, it's definitely like it took me back. It took me back to the days of Comtech chips. You remember those? The little action figures that came with those stupid things.
Oh. Yes.
And it says like two phrases. It was pretty useless, actually, just as a gimmick, totally useless. But it's still, I have fond memories. I have pleasant thoughts about that whole thing.
Totally.
But the other thing, and you pointed this out before, when you watch the prequels, in toto with the original trilogy, you appreciate the masterful execution of Palpatine's plan.
Mm-hmm.
That guy was on his shit. I gotta be honest, the Jedi totally had it coming because this old guy, he's running circles around these guys.
Right.
Yeah. It's like it ended, and I'm like, no, respect to the future emperor.
He earned it.
Yep, that was
in the work.
That was he laid it out. He bided his time. He let the Jedi just twiddle their thumbs. I have to give respect to that.
Yeah. But I know what you're talking about. I mean, just the power of seeing a Star Wars film on screen is just very impactful. I mean, the music, the world, even if it's not one of your favorites, there's just, you still get that Star Wars tingle.
Well, and I think that explains why this re-release is performing pretty well, why Return of the Jedi performed last year. I think people just like going to the movies and watching a Star Wars. And so for me, I'm like, okay, well, I'm assuming that, we'll get Attack of the Clones in a couple of years.
Hey, I'm all for it. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that nap as well. Right around when Obi-Wan jumps out the window, I'll be sawing logs,
That's funny. I was hoping to catch it. I was supposed to go tonight, but as we said, we're not feeling too great today. So I was pleased to see that it's going to be playing into next week. So I'll try to do that, I think.
Well, for all the people who talk about how Star Wars is dead, I mean, clearly there's still some juice in the tank.
The love is there. The
love is there. And after the film, there was a little extended promo for the Acolyte, the new streaming series.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it looks good, but if I'm being honest, I don't know anything about, like, nothing I've seen so far tells me what it's about.
That's a good point. And I saw the trailer, and actually someone I saw online, I guess I don't know if I should say that or not, but I saw like a little bootleg thing of that clip.
Okay.
And it was fun because Carrie-Anne Moss is in it,
Mm-hmm.
Being a badass Jedi and everything. But I feel like a lot of their stuff is starting to feel a little bit the same.
Yeah.
Its color palette is very brown, very serious Jedi, not a lot of fun. And when I was watching Empire several months ago, I remember thinking, do this,
Right.
like ships that don't start when they're supposed to, and people, tugging on their collar. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this one. Like that. I think a little more fun needs to be injected back into it. So,
I mean, to that point, I think there really is an opportunity. It's never going to happen because they took a bath on it, but I truly feel like there is an audience for another Han Solo movie.
Yeah, that one's complicated, but I feel like that was looking in the right direction. And not that I want everything to be like that. I want it all. I want the Jedi stories. I want the people, the boots on the ground. I want the rebel, like whoever, whatever. Like some can be serious, some can be funny, some can be romantic, whatever. But I just think we do need the spectrum a little bit.
Yeah. I mean that's a movie that the problem is nobody watched it when it came out.
Yeah. We had that funny experience where we saw it early.
Yeah.
And we're like, man, that was great.
Yep. Looking forward to the sequel in a few years.
Yep.
But it seems like any people who have discovered it since, broadly, there seems to be an appreciation for it. So, again, like, unfortunately, they just spent ungodly amounts of money making that movie. So I don't see a sequel ever happening. But I think there is a market for it.
I agree, and I can never remember the title, but I know there's a Star Wars series coming that's they keep saying it's like the Goonies.
Skeleton Crew?
Oh, is that what it, or maybe? I honestly can't remember. But I love the idea of that because it feels like a different energy.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see that energy, and I have high hopes for that one.
Yeah, that's the John Watts created series.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Jude Law. It says it's a coming-of-age story about 4 children who make a discovery on their home planet, get lost in the galaxy, and go on an adventure to get back home.
Let's do it.
Yeah, hey, why not? I'm looking forward to all the bitching and whining about that.
Yeah.
That to me is part and parcel of the Star Wars experience.
And then I'm going to be like, it wasn't brown enough, and no one was serious.
They're treating it seriously, yeah. Here, by the way, while we're talking about beloved trilogies, this past week I revisited the Mel Gibson Mad Max trilogy.
Oh, the whole trilogy. Okay.
In the lead up, we got Furiosa coming out, a Mad Max saga, and so my oldest, he was like, "Hey, let's watch the Mad Max movies." I was like, "Hey, no time like the present." So we went through those, and you and I, we're going to talk through the original Mad Max probably in the next couple of weeks in the lead up to that. So I'll withhold my comments, but the one thing I'll say is George Miller needs to direct more movies.
Yeah.
Because what's remarkable to me is that we go from 79 to 86, and you see he goes from an ER doc who has never directed anything in the original Mad Max to Beyond Thunderdome 6 years later, and he's just a maestro, Wow. And it's this remarkable learning curve. And I'm like, God, get this guy behind the camera more, because it's been 9 years since Fury Road came out. Right. But I mean, I have a great deal of affinity for those movies anyway. But it'd been long enough that it was fun to drop back into that world,
Yeah, and I mean he's 79 too. It's amazing that he did Furiosa. Honestly,
I know.
The movie was such looks like it's probably intense to make.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get at least one more Mad Max movie out of him.
Absolutely, but it's crazy too. I mean, some people may forget, but he also made Babe.
That's right.
And
he produced the first one. He directed the second one.
Yeah, directed the second one, and then Happy Feet. His filmography is kind of nuts.
The other thought I had watching these 3 films, I was like, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Mad Max might be the last remaining completely filmmaker-driven franchise that we have left. Right? In other words, the first 6 Star Wars movies, man, they are George Lucas through and through, right?
Yeah.
Like or dislike, agree or disagree with his choices, they are a product of his vision. You can say the same about the Matrix films up to this point in terms of representing fully the Wachowski's vision. Mad Max, George Miller owns those rights.
Oh wow!
So I mean, it belongs to him, right? And I mean, who knows what happens in the future? But everything up to this point is a reflection of his unique worldview, his idiosyncrasies, and I think that's what makes those movies special. And that was my thought watching this, those original 3. We haven't done Fury Road yet, but I'm like, this is the last of a dying breed,
Mm-hmm.
It's remarkable because Matrix is about to get handed off to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Right. Drew Goddard, I believe.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so maybe it'll be good. We don't know,
Yeah.
but it's going to be something different. We know that.
Yeah, but you're right. Just for people, in terms of franchises and worlds and coming from an author,
Yeah.
a single author, a vision.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. We're not, I don't know. And then this is probably not the perfect 1-to-1, but you look at the performance of the Fall Guy this weekend, which could have been a possible franchise starter. And maybe there'll be a sequel. I don't know. But it's just, it looks increasingly difficult to do such a thing.
Yeah. It's a shame, Yeah. I think to have a filmmaker fully assert his vision, and not in a, like a, Quentin Tarantino way where it's like, a smaller budget and it's aimed at, this, he's playing with massive budgets. This stuff is meant to play, the fact that Fury Road turned out as well as it did, considering how much money was on the line. I mean, it's amazing,
What a gamble too. I think back, for Warner Brothers. I mean, for this trilogy that hadn't had its last film since the 80s.
That's right.
And to dump all that money and to trust him to come up with something that then did blow everybody's hair back.
But nominated for Best Picture, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
But I had not seen them. You're the one who got me into them after I loved Fury Road. So
yeah, that's right.
Pretty amazing.
Wow.
So I'm hoping, I have to admit, I'm a little concerned, and it has to, with Furiosa, but which has more to do with the state of theater going these days.
Right.
I mean, hopefully it does well, but the chances of it doing really, really, really well just feel, I don't know that anything's going to do really, really, really well.
That was my thought. I'm fairly certain it will be good.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that because I trust George Miller.
Yeah.
Is the audience therefore? I don't know. I genuinely don't know,
Yeah.
But I suppose that's a conversation we'll have in a couple weeks.
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Well, let's take another short break, and we have some listener letters on the other side. And we are back, and like I said, we got some listener letters. This has been fun. This has been a recurring bit on this show where people write in and share their memorable movie-going experiences, and I will say again, keep them coming. I love hearing these.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Me too.
So this is a message we got on Facebook from Greg Gear, and he says, "Hey guys, I've been a longtime fan of the podcast, and if you care for one more memorable movie-going experience, I thought I would share mine. I was 10 years old when the original Star Wars came out, and to say my little mind was blown away is an understatement. I was used to sci-fi movies that started with lots of boring stuff before it got to the good parts. I had not yet learned the term exposition." Well, when Star Wars began with that explosion of music and then the shot of the Tantive 4 being chased by the Star Destroyer, that seemed to go on forever. My eyes bugged out and my jaw hit the floor. Not only did I go back to see it over 20 times in the theater, when that sort of thing was feasible, I got my entire family and friends to see it as well. Needless to say, I became a fan for life, even becoming one of the first fans to get Bantha Tracks, the newsletter of the official Star Wars fan club. But that's not the movie-going experience I want to tell you about. Fast forward to 1983, and the anticipation for Return of the Jedi was huge. It had been a wait of 3 years since Empire Strikes Back, and I honestly didn't know what to expect. This was long before spoilers were rampant, but I do remember picking up a magazine, it might have been Starlog, which confidently said that they had seen the script, and the other that Yoda referred to was, quote, as we suspected, Han Solo.
Ha!
So that was in my brain, as well as the trailer, which featured quick shots of Luke standing next to Darth Vader, and he was wearing black. Was Luke going to the dark side? Anyway, the day of the opening, the movie theater in town had a 7 o'clock showing, so my friends and I piled into my mom's car with 3 people stuffed on the front bench seat, 4 crammed in the back. Seatbelts? We're only going up the road. We got there for 5 o'clock and the line was already around the building. We sat down with our bags of Burger King and Walkmans with cassettes of Star Wars music and waited. When the doors finally opened, we ran inside and grabbed the first row we could so we could all sit together. The audience was on fire. Every joke got a huge laugh, especially during the opening sequence on Tatooine. You're going to die here, Convenient. And every explosion got a cheer. But the moment I will never forget was at the end when the Emperor was over Luke blasting him with Force lightning, and Vader looked back and forth between his son and his master. The entire audience was on their feet yelling at the screen, "Do it! Do it! Do it!" And when Vader finally turned and raised the Emperor over his head, the crowd went nuts, cheering and yelling. It was an experience I will never forget, and one I had never had before nor since. I've seen every Star Wars film on opening weekend, and while the original is still my favorite, Jedi will always hold a special place because of that experience. I hope this didn't go on too long. I love listening to you guys, as it is kind of like hanging out with two friends chatting about the movies on my commute to work. Thanks again for everything you do, and happy Star Wars Day. May the Force be with you always.
Oh man, I was there. I was there. It's one of those things we talk about where we feel it's very special to go see Empire in the theater because you get to watch it again, more focused and whatever. But that's the only experience I've had with Star Wars, the original trilogy in the theater is, I know this movie so well, now I get to see it big. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be at like that perfect age and to go see Jedi and to not know what's going to happen. To think that Luke could possibly be bad, the tease. I didn't even, I've heard that before, and it's just, I've never had that experience of not knowing, so it's like seeing that in the trailer and being like, is Luke bad? That must have been incredible.
Yeah, I've said this before, that you and I were part of like the tweener Star Wars generation, where it like we were so young when the original films were released that it was sort of holistic, it was a match set, but we were still old enough for the anticipation of the prequels. So, we didn't grow up with the prequels. And so it's kind of that I'm always fascinated by that. Like there's the people who got to see the original trilogy in 3-year intervals, and they had the opportunity for the build up. And then there's, chumps like us who we just got it all at once,
Well, it reminds me, it feels very appropriate for people our age, because I've seen this a lot, when they try to give you a generation, you're a generation this or that, Generation X and millennials. But a lot of times you and I get lumped into zennials.
That's
this
right.
Weird little window between. So it feels fitting that it carries over to our Star Wars fandom.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I remember last year watching Return of the Jedi. Yeah, definitely people applauded when Vader tosses Palpatine's skinny ass down the old thingamabob there.
My only question though is, in 1983, how did they know to cheer him on, yelling "Do it," without Darth Vader saying no? No.
That's one of those things. I've said this before. Do I like it? I do not. Do I mind it? I mean, it's like, I always think, I'm like, well, if it was in it originally, would I have minded it? Probably not. So I don't mind it now that it is. But it's definitely George Lucas not leaving well enough alone.
It's definitely one of the less egregious additions or revisions or whatever you want to call them. But I think for us, because we know the film backwards and forwards already, you can't help but feel like you're seeing Scotch tape on the screen or something.
Well,
it's
the Ewoks blinking is just weirder to me.
I don't hate it, but my attention is always drawn to it. If that makes sense. Yeah.
But again, and we've talked about this before, but the fact that people cheered when Hayden Christensen showed up at the end of Jedi, to me, that is an indication that was a good call by George Lucas. And I've been in support of that from the beginning. I'm not crazy about the footage that he used. Like, I was like, hey, maybe give Hayden a heads up.
It does look like it's in between takes. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, I didn't know. I didn't shoot that,
Right.
But this is something that I sent you a screen grab of somebody. I wish I could remember who, but somebody on social media made this point of how, by virtue of how they've brought Hayden Christensen back via cameos and, Obi-Wan Kenobi and in the Ahsoka show, and you see him much more as sort of the charming rogue, that Obi-Wan kind of reflected fondly on, in A New Hope, but also who we saw in the cartoon show.
Right.
And this is something I've said for years. I know I've said it too. I'm like, if you watch the cartoon, that's doing the work of making you care what happens in Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
But they've allowed Hayden Christensen to inhabit that character, and it makes the Clone Wars cartoon feel much more woven into the fabric of the story.
Yeah.
And that's good for all of it. And just that gets to something I've said for a while, where I'm like, the sequel trilogy, for all of its flaws, and I mean, we've we're not naive about that. One thing I've said all along is I think they benefit from the fact that Star Wars is in a position where it's constantly unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
And between the Mandalorian setting up stuff in the sequel trilogy, between whatever they have planned with the Rey movie, I mean, the sequels get to have context added to them, and that will help. I think that will help people's appreciation of them.
Yeah. No, it makes me happy. I was one of the people, didn't love the Hayden Christensen revision at the end of Jedi. Just again, decades of knowing it a different way. It was hard for me to accept, but I have come around on it, and I do. Even bringing the real world into it, I kind of love it for him.
Yeah, just
how beloved he is to like a new generation now, and
it's really it is nice. I gotta say,
yeah.
I hope Jake Lloyd gets to realize that the pieces of shit that made his life miserable as a 10-year-old are not representative of the people who grew up loving that film.
Yeah, I don't remember what the event was, but I feel like a couple years ago at a Star Wars celebration, Hayden came out and received like rapturous applause, and everyone was like, good, he deserves that. He should have had that like a long time ago. Whatever. It was nice to see him finally get that reception.
That's right.
And I would love that for Jake Lloyd.
Yeah.
I really, really hope he gets some sort of version of that. And, I don't know. He just needs to know.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like what we've seen with Ahmed Best, right?
Yeah.
And not only people like this is one thing I'll say. Watching Phantom Menace, I was like, Jar Jar is like, it's like fine, like the character. It's not. It doesn't work for me as an adult, but so what? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it was very clarifying. I was like, and I was never crazy about Jar Jar, but I was never like, vitriolic about it either.
Right.
But it's like totally fine. Kids like him. So what? Right.
Yeah.
And that's you talked to, because I think I've said this before. My nephew, who's now, he's like 24, 25. I remember talking to him like, 10 years ago. And he's like, what, people don't like Jar Jar? What's wrong with Jar Jar?
Right.
And that was my like light switch moment.
Sometimes I do wonder, as I've gotten older and rewatched The Goonies, if adults were like, what the hell is sloth?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
And so it's like, every generation's got their thing that they love, and, older people aren't going to get, but they're going to grow up continuing to love it. And,
Well, this is the thing. And when it comes to the sequels, this has been my contention all along, and it's just it's like a longitudinal experiment. I firmly believe that given another 10 years or so, we're going to see the exact same thing happen with them that we've seen happen with the prequels.
I believe you, because history proves this sort of thing, but I still probably will be like, well, how about that? As I witness it a little bit.
Yeah, well, but I've said all along, I'm like, the prequels, look, I will always view them as flawed, the prequels.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate that they mean something to the people who were kids when they were released. That's great. I can appreciate that. But I'll always be like, well, I wish. And that's, so I'm kind of, we've had this discussion. I'm like, my Star Wars will always be my 3. And I don't need anything else to be what those movies are to me.
Right. Yeah, no, agreed. And, going back just a little bit, when you're talking about Ahmed Best, I was like, oh, I want him to have a hug too. And then it made me feel weird about how many people I feel like need hugs after their experience with working on those films.
Kelly Marie Tran, Daisy Ridley, Laura Dern. I mean,
Boyega. Like,
John Boyega.
I wish I could hug them all.
Yeah. I forget her name, the Inquisitor from Obi-Wan Kenobi, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, all fandoms have elements of fanaticism, and maybe it's just because of the visibility of Star Wars, but I'm like, God, how can you be so effing miserable about this thing you purport to love?
Yeah.
I mean, I genuinely don't get it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Or I just, I mean, this is like a discussion we've been having ever since the prequels, but like, it's one thing to feel disappointment, but it's another thing to send out hatred into the world.
Yes.
And we could all do with a little less of that.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, everyone has experienced, oh, here's the latest entry of this franchise that I like. Oh no, I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I can say for me, definitely, and maybe less so when I was younger, definitely now, I'm like, okay, well, at least I have the ones I like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you just get on with it, you know?
Yeah.
That said, this year marks 5 years since the release of Rise of Skywalker. So,
wow.
I wouldn't be surprised if you and I ended up talking through that one at the end of the year.
I'm into it. We were one of the people who were a little kinder to that movie.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
Memory serves. And I've caught it on, like YouTube TV or whatever. And it's like, it's never going to be my favorite, but there's moments that are fun.
There's a lot of stuff in it I genuinely like. So,
Yeah. Not my favorite. I don't want to sound like I'm rewriting history, but
no, not at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, here's another letter we got. This is from Adam O, who emailed us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. And he says, like you both, I have a soft spot for 1989 as a year for films. I didn't see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in theaters, sadly, but it remains beloved. I did see Batman in the theater that year, opening night. I was 9 and aware of a Batman movie, but living in my isolated small town, I don't think I realized how big of a deal it was. My parents surprised me on that evening with taking me to the downtown Juneau 2-screen theater, RIP gross 20th century, to see a line literally around the block. We didn't get tickets for
repeating detail, isn't it? In these older
right.
80s,
I miss the line around the block experience. Actually, no, I don't. That's not true.
No, I like it.
I like having my seat reserved. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
We didn't get tickets to the first showing, but went to dinner and then got in line for tickets for the second showing of the night. Even then, we ended up right up front, and my head was all the way back, looking straight up at the screen. None of that dampened my excitement. Seeing the opening "I'm Batman" scene, to the Joker reveal, to the third act on the cathedral, it was beautiful. I know I had seen other movies in the theater before that night, but that was the first one that really stuck out as a memory. But none of that is why I'm emailing you today. There's another. This is good. That was all preamble.
Yeah.
There's another 1989 classic that's another favorite of mine and one that's a near annual rewatch for me. You may be familiar with a couple of the lead actors in this film. I think they've had somewhat of decent careers. The film is the Joe Dante cult classic The Burbs, starring Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher, with an incredible supporting cast. Henry Gibson, the Illinois Nazi in Blues Brothers. I hate Illinois Nazis. Rick Ducommun, who I know Zach you will recognize as the Navy pilot in Hunt for Red October. That's true, I do. Bruce Dern, Corey Feldman, and more. Maybe I'm the weird one for having such an affinity for this movie, but I don't think I'm alone. Much like Brian, I'm a big fan of the weird things happening in my backyard subgenre of movies, and I think this movie played a big part in that. Much like how The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is my all-time favorite Twilight Zone episode. As always, gentlemen, thanks again for a great show and best wishes.
I love that. The Burbs. That makes me think of our friend Sean.
Yeah, he's a huge fan of The Burbs, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Burbs has a great Jerry Goldsmith score.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's such a fun movie. I've probably seen it maybe like 2 or 3 times. Like, it's not one that I know backwards and forwards, but so in a way it always continues to surprise me. I think I watched it a handful of years ago and was like, man, yeah, I forgot this movie is so much fun.
It's weird. It's like hard to find because as far as I know, it's not available on streaming.
Oh, that's too bad.
Which is weird, right? Like,
yeah, Tom Hanks movie.
You'd think it would be. There's these weird like blind spots on streaming.
I wonder why that is.
You know what? Let me see on Vudu right now. just as an experiment.
It is. I think about that a lot. I mean, with the DVD boom, they started transferring all these movies, and I wondered, so who creates this list and puts an order of importance? And then once things were put on the Blu-ray, who's like, oh, did they have the same list? Or they're like, okay, you know what? This didn't sell so well on DVD. Don't worry about it. Like, how does that, it just seems very daunting to continue to carry over every single movie to the new format.
Yeah, I mean, unless you've got something like, The Abyss and True Lies, where there's this groundswell of like, get this movie out. So much stuff falls into the cracks, right?
Yeah.
I feel like The Burbs is like that. There's another movie. It's a John Grisham adaptation. It's called Runaway Jury.
Yeah.
Which really good. That's actually one of the better Grisham movies, and it's not available on streaming.
Huh. That's so
and
weird.
Actually, and even a better example, you remember Ransom?
Yeah, give me back my son.
Exactly. Which I remember just going up to random people on the streets and saying that. I was so moved by Mel Gibson's performance in that movie. It's just not available.
That is so weird. I mean, of all the things that are available on streaming and 4K and whatnot, you just think, I mean, someone had to see that on a list, and did they just go, not that one?
Yeah.
Like what was the calculus? I'm so curious.
I have no idea. Yeah, so The Burbs is in that bucket as well.
Wow.
So I guess, Adam, right to Voodoo, and then we'll get our commentary.
Actually, I have the Blu-ray. Sean gave it to me.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember how he ended up with like an extra or something, and so I've been meaning to pop it in and revisit it.
Well, after you're done, send it my way, and I'll give it another look.
Yeah, maybe we could watch it together next visit.
Hey, that actually, there you go. That's an idea right there. Yeah. Could be something to do. Thank you, Adam, for that. And here's one last note. This is from Mick Jamison, who says, "Hey boys, wanted to drop a line regarding your Flintstones commentary. With a memory of seeing the movie in a sold-out theater and having to actually sit on the floor in the aisle to watch it." Wow. Which I think was actually the last time I watched the movie. More specifically, I wanted to lament the sweet spot you both mentioned, how characters like the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Inspector Gadget, and more so influenced and inspired our outlook and opinions in our lives beyond pop culture, and how in this generation that is dwindling. My 13 and 10-year-olds don't watch Looney Tunes, the Flintstones, Tom and Jerry, or other 40 or 50-year-old cartoons like we did, let alone the Three Stooges or the Honeymooners. Where will the children of today learn about violence, death, racism? Well, most likely on YouTube and the internet. So seriously, though, great commentary on a movie that's not The Magnificent Ambersons. That is true. But was an enjoyable listen because of the insights and humor you both so regularly bring to the table. Thank you for that. Looking forward to your inevitable Dudley Do-Right commentary. Oh, it's a coming.
I've got to see. I've never seen it. So.
Oh, it was terrible.
Really?
It's terrible, but it's such a shame because it's a great cast, and I love those old Jay Ward cartoons.
Yeah. Wait, I have a question for you. Oh, yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So, do you remember when we were growing up how they were constantly trying to bring those characters like the Mickey Mouse, the Bugs Bunny, the whoever, like into the culture? So in the 80s, they made Mickey Mouse dress like Don Johnson from Miami Vice. And then in the 90s, there was that t-shirt with Bugs Bunny and Taz, and they were dressed like Crisscross, with their clothes on backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, there hasn't been any efforts made, to I don't know, to bring them into the culture now on t-shirts that say yeet on them or something.
Well, I think when we were growing up, and I would say this is through the 90s, certainly Looney Tunes cartoons were still airing regularly on television.
Yeah.
I know, it was Merry Melodies was in the Fox Kids lineup. Saturday mornings on ABC, there was the Bugs Bunny and Tweety show. So it was like airing regularly, right? Mm-hmm. And that was just part of our diet. Definitely for me, I can say my kids have been steadily exposed to Bugs Bunny because I put those on for them all the time, all the Looney Tunes shorts. I have Blu-rays of whatever they've released. And, for them, it's part of their language. I think I said this before. I remember watching Space Jam with them as kids, and a couple years later, we were watching some news story about Michael Jordan, and one of my kids was like, "Oh, isn't that Bugs Bunny's friend?"
I love that.
Which that should be like the subhead whenever he's interviewed, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, friend of Bugs Bunny. But yeah, I mean, these are not present tense characters anymore, and I think I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I don't think they're ever going to go away, but I think that Mickey Mouse has always been like, at least all throughout my life, Mickey Mouse was always like a corporate icon first.
Yes, I've found that not to be the case for some people.
Right.
But for me, that was, I was more of a Looney Tunes person. And
right.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse was like Coca-Cola.
Yeah. But I feel like Bugs Bunny has become that now as well.
Yeah.
Where to the extent that kids are familiar with him, it's as a branding exercise, Which I would say is a shame,
Yeah, I know. Part of me is like, well, time marches on. But on the other hand, I do think they're good, and I hate to see them be forgotten,
I mean, this is a broader conversation, but I lament the dwindling of sort of these monocultural artifacts, things that we all collectively share in,
Yeah, because that's what, I mean, you wanted to watch cartoons before school. This is what we watched. It was the choice was made for us.
Right.
So now your kids get to pick whatever they want to watch.
I mean, it's kind of like, the Joe Rogan podcast.
Go on.
Which like, he has a huge audience, right? It's like, I don't know what it is. It's like 14 million, something like that. Right. That's big. It's a huge audience, right? But when you look at the total number of podcasts out there, his audience represents like 5% of the total podcast audience.
Wow.
Right. And so my point is not to diminish whatever Rogan does. I think he's an idiot and he's terrible. However, that's an impressive audience. My point is, even that big number does not represent like a plurality of people.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, everybody's in their own little bubbles. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I mean, I think all of that is a shame. I think so much of where we're at right now, where it's just people have, it's just they plug into their own reality, and that's unfortunate, because I think our pop culture is kind of a language. It's like a shared language, and so when everybody has their own pop culture that they're consuming, then we have less things in common.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in my media classes, usually on the first day, I'll start out by being like, hey, tell me your name, whatever, and tell me like what's the last good movie you saw. And more, I have students who are like, oh, I haven't seen any movies. I just watch TikTok.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, everybody's TikTok is unique.
Right. So they're not even seeing the same things.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, isn't that a shame? It feels like a shame.
Yeah. I want to be like open, to new things. And I do think there's some cool, fun creativity happening out there in those apps. But I agree with you. It is nice when there are certain touchstones that we all can kind of relate to with one another.
Yeah.
And maybe those are, at least for the past, 10, 15 years, have been Marvel films.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's one thing, it's not
right.
several, but I don't know.
Well, let us ponder this while we take a short break, and then we'll come back and we have some headlines to discuss. And we are back. Brian, you back?
I'm here.
So a little bit of sad news. I wanted to mark this occasion just for the sake of history, for the sake of the gaze of historians. Stratford Square is now no longer a present tense shopping mall.
Our beloved Stratford Square, who longtime listeners will know was a place that you and I, even when we didn't know each other, that was a gathering place for us, whether it was for shopping or for seeing movies.
Think about that. We were passing each other by like ships in the night.
I think that's crazy. I know for certain, with again bringing up our friend Sean, he and I were both there opening day in 1990 for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Didn't know one another, but I was like, yeah, I was there opening day. I stood around, the banister, and he's like, yeah, I was there too, opening day, standing around the banister. And it's just amazing to think we could have been, side by side in line, having no idea we'd become the best of friends.
You were the guy kicking his seat and annoying the piss out of him. You had no idea.
Yeah.
So this mall, which it was about 10 minutes away from where I grew up in Hanover Park. I had my first job there. I used to go there all the time. And whenever I would go back to Chicago ever since I've lived in California for 20 years, whenever I went back, I'd make a stop there and just kind of see how things were going. It's the old homestead. And I was seeing it slowly, decaying in front of my eyes. I mean, the mall was open, but it's like nobody told the people in the neighborhood that it was open,
Right.
And this past summer, I visited Chicago with my boys, and we happened to pass by Bloomingdale. I was like, you know what, let's go to Stratford, and we walked through there, and it was like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, and just walked through, and I recorded a whole walkthrough with the boys. I'm glad I did that. And then earlier this year, news came out. Yeah, the joint's shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
We're pulling the plug. It's been in a vegetative state for several years. We're just pulling the plug, and so as of the end of April, it's closed. And I saw plenty of people posting videos online of suddenly you had people showing up to pay their respects. And I was like, so many movies I watched in that mall, and so much living I did in that mall.
Yeah, a lot of memories tied to that mall. Toys that my parents bought me, and movies that I saw, and my mom buying me, mint chocolate chip ice cream so I could eat that while I threw coins in the fountain. A lot of memories with that mall. Yeah.
And so, to all things a season.
Yep. Yeah. I'm glad we can at least honor it here.
Thanks for the memories, Stratford.
Yep.
Another passing I wanted to note, a bit of sad news. Bernard Hill passed away.
Right.
So he was the actor. He had a very lengthy career on stage and screen. But of course, if he's best known for anything, it's for two films that won 11 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
He played King Theoden in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and of course, he was Captain E.J. Smith, the doomed captain in Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, he was in The Ghost in the Darkness. He was in The Scorpion King, which I just revisited a couple days ago. He was in Gothica, the Halle Berry movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's one of the great that guy actors, but certainly. He was 79 at the time of his passing, meaning he was in his 50s when he played both Captain Smith and King Theoden.
Wow. Okay.
Which I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. Whenever I watch Lord of the Rings, I've said this for years. I'm like, what a great character Theoden was,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The whole journey he goes on, emerging from being, hypnotized by Brad Dourif. But he has this great moment in The Two Towers when he realizes that his son has died while he was, while his brain was clouded. And Bernard Hill, the way he plays the grief of having lost his son, it's just a tremendous performance,
Yeah. And in Titanic, being probably, the 10th build sort of character, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But he brings a very memorable stoic warmth to that role.
Yeah.
He's so memorable in that movie.
Certainly, the moment where his character passes,
Mm-hmm.
It does hit you,
Mm-hmm.
And that's a movie that just benefited so much by the casting. All of the secondary and tertiary characters are so well cast.
Mm-hmm. The very stick in your mind, make an impression.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Another film that Bernard Hill is in, which doesn't get talked about that much, but Valkyrie with Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Wow, I forgot about that.
I really like that movie.
Me too. It's been a while, but I remember enjoying that.
That I think that came out during the everyone's shitting on Tom Cruise phase.
Yeah, 2008.
Right? Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds about right, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of those movies too where you already know the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
but they
Yep.
still manage to generate all this tension.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a great performer with an amazing roster of films that he appeared in. And that's something that people will be watching. If nothing else, people will be watching Lord of the Rings and Titanic forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so his work will live on. So Bernard Hill, rest in peace. Hey, we got our first look at the new Superman, Brian.
I know. I was so curious your thoughts on the new Superman suit.
So James Gunn is directing the new film entitled simply Superman, and it stars David Corenswet in the title role. So it's James Gunn put out a picture on social media. It depicts Corenswet putting on his boots. He's all suited up. He's putting on his boots while a death ray of some kind is doing its business, decimating Metropolis right outside his window.
Mm-hmm.
The choice of picture is an interesting one. It's not what you'd expect, kind of the hands on his hips, standing with the, gazing off into the sky, something like that. Instead, it's something a little more domestic, I suppose.
Yeah, I did find the energy a little weird, if I'm being
Mhm.
honest. Sort of like weary, where it looks
Here
like
we
there's
go
an
again.
urgent, yeah, there's an urgent matter going on in the background, and he's sort of like, like putting on his boots. If I'm being honest, it kind of reminded me of like something you'd see like a cosplayer posting on there, as almost like in a humorous way, like, "Well, here we go again," kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that aside, yeah, I'm very curious. What do you think of the suit?
I like it. If I'm being honest, I'm not over the moon about what I've seen so far, but I mean, I'm reflexively, I'm not a fan of a whole bunch of texture all over Superman's suit.
I'm noticing a lot of superhero suits are like that. I mean, do you think that's to give them some sort of, I don't know if this is the right word, but like verisimilitude, where it's like if it was just spandex, you're like, what? But if it has some sort of grip or texture to it, you're like, oh, that looks like there's some sort of utility reason for the way that or the material it's made of, or I don't know. That feels like the common vocabulary of the superhero suits.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything has to look that way now,
Mm-hmm.
So I get it, and it's not a deal breaker for me. But I am like, I think and I'm biased. Obviously, I grew up watching Chris Reeve. I don't think there's anything that wrong with Chris Reeve's costume. That you couldn't kind of gussy it up a little bit and give it a little zazz,
Mm-hmm.
and have that be the suit. Again, I want to emphasize I'm not like, oh, this sucks, throw it away. I am like, just reflexively, I don't like, and that's something that DC Comics has done also in years past, where they've added a bunch of greeblies to Superman's suit.
Mm.
I from what I can see in this picture, it looks like he's got the red trunks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That makes me happy. I'm glad about that. However, I see that he's got like a raised collar.
I was very curious what you were going to say about that. Yeah.
I think I've said this before. I can't remember. I'm not a fan of Superman with a collar.
Uh-huh.
I think that his neckline should be, it should be at his chest level.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something vaguely fascistic about Superman with a raised collar. I think there's something sort of there's like an everyman quality about him having like a t-shirt neckline, or even lower.
Huh. That's interesting.
And I don't even know if that, Brian, I don't even know if that makes sense, to be honest.
No, I kind of get it. I was kind of curious where you're going with that, but I can. You said sort of the everyman aspect of, well, we all have collars like that,
Yeah.
at our shoulder lines. But does that raised collar come from a version of Superman, or?
Yeah, the most obvious source seems to be the New 52 costume that Jim Lee designed in 2011.
Mhm.
This seems like, and this is just based on this one picture, it seems like about 10 years ago, John Romita Jr. did a version of the Jim Lee designed suit, and this looks like it's heavily inspired by that.
Okay.
So it's not like it doesn't have some inspiration, but just at a glance, if I'm being honest, I prefer the Man of Steel costume
Mm-hmm.
over this one. So it's one of those, it's these weird things. It's like Man of Steel didn't have the trunks, but it had the lowered neckline.
Mm-hmm.
This one has the trunks, but it has the raised neckline. So it's like, well, six of one, half a dozen of another. I don't know.
Right. Well, and you have the S looks a bit more like a symbol, like possibly an alien symbol versus an English letter S.
Yeah, and that's one of those. Again, people are kind of upset about that, and I'm like, I'm sort of like, look, we're at a point now where every time there's a new version of Superman, they're going to slightly redesign the S so that's that vein of merchandising.
Yeah, right.
Right. So in other words, you can sell your T-shirts with the traditional Superman symbol, and then you have your James Gunn Superman symbol, and you make twice the money. I mean, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Is that cynical? Maybe, but it's. I mean, why would we not expect cynicism from these corporations?
Right. Do you think it will mean hope, or someone will be like, so does that symbol mean hope? And he'll be like, no, it means aspirational.
It means nope.
Yeah. Try to give it another realistic or more down to earth sort of. Why would he have a letter S on it? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, come up with another explanation.
I mean, I think at this point, the idea that it's a Kryptonian glyph is pretty much just baked into the cake. And that came in with the Richard Donner film, and I think that's pretty much what everybody goes with now.
Right.
I think that makes more sense than the idea that Superman would design this weird S-looking symbol.
Right.
But again, I'm fine with it. This is I'm not over the moon about it. It doesn't mean doesn't mean I hate it. I'm like, well, no, sorry. I mean, it looks like Superman at a glance. It looks like Superman, which that's the most essential thing.
Mm-hmm. And then our eyes will adjust to it. And if the movie's great, maybe it'll become our favorite suit.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've realized is that other than Chris Reeve, every live action suit, I always look at it and I'm like, well, it's good, but, and there's always some but, and so look, I'm being very transparent. Like that just tells you I'm biased towards the Christopher Reeve version. And so everything that's not that is always going to look slightly off to me.
Totally.
So look, this is going to be baseline 0 for the people who grow up with this version. Everything that's not this is going to look off. Right. So I want to see more. I want to see more pictures. I've said all along, I think David Corenswet is a great choice. I'm excited by all the casting in this movie. So I'm, as of this moment, I'm nothing but enthusiasm. As far as I know, they're done with principal photography. So I'm like, let's give us the trailer, man. Let's see something,
Yeah.
So, we'll see. It's due out next summer. Lots of time to speculate between now and then. But as of now, I'm positive because I just rather be positive.
Yeah, I'm excited. New Superman movie. I'm optimistic.
If nothing else, I look at this new Superman movie as an opportunity for us to plan our commentary track for Superman Returns.
Oh, okay.
Which I have not watched the whole way through since opening night 2006.
Wow. I may have seen it at least once. But kind of same, probably in that era. So I remember weird little things about it, but not the movie really as a whole.
See, watching that in the theaters, that was one of those experiences where I realized, like, I can't go into new movies expecting to be transported like a little, you know what I mean? Because the whole buildup, we're making a sequel to the old Christopher Reeve movies. We're bringing in theme music. It's going to be that. I'm like, I want to feel like that again.
Right.
And boy, was that the exact wrong mentality to have going into that movie. You know,
Yeah.
it's a shame.
Yep. But hey, we'll talk through it.
We'll get there. Speaking of stuff that we'll be able to talk through, hey, there's going to be less Marvel movies to talk through if Bob Iger has his way.
That's right. So Bob Iger on his recent quarterly call mentioned that they're planning to trim down their Marvel output on both TV and theatrically moving forward.
Which I'm going to say that's a good thing. First of all, even before we get to the details of what he said, just in general, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was starting. No matter what you're talking about, if you get oversaturated with it, it's going to feel less special. Right?
Yes.
So, and then maybe even you might get a little creatively exhausted and the product will suffer also. So
what did he say specifically?
I think he said, excuse me, they were going to slowly decrease the volume, go down to 2 TV series a year instead of what had become 4, and reduce film output from, this is his quote, from maybe 4 a year to 2 or a maximum of 3. So,
wow,
but
okay.
It's funny because 3 a year still feels like a lot from one franchise.
Well, so phase 3 was 3 a year.
Yeah.
Like in the lead up to Endgame, we were getting 3 a year.
But that feels good. It's like if you dice the year up into thirds, you're getting one in the beginning, middle, and end of the year.
Yeah.
That's
because they were doing like February, March, and then May, and then like August or November, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
But that was in the lead up to Endgame, where everybody was anticipating some kind of culmination. So I think just kind of increasing the scarcity is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's it's tricky, but I mean the onslaught of streaming shows really it just made people realize, oh wait, I can skip Marvel stuff.
Yeah. Which, it's funny because, to be fair, you and I were saying maybe that's okay in the way that you go into a comic book shop and you have 100 titles of comic books, and you don't have to be a fan of all of them. You get to pick and choose the things that you want to like. But when you're making a television series that costs $200+ million, everybody better watch that thing.
Right. Well, and just to add on to that, what we started to see is people saying, "Oh, hey, I can skip this. I can skip it all."
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And that's the dilemma, right? So it's like you have to make everything matter, and by virtue of that, you have to limit just how much stuff is out there. And that's, I mean, it's completely unsurprising to me because the quality suffered.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've said before, She-Hulk, I liked She-Hulk. I think some of the effects were dodgy, but on balance, it was a good show, and I think it was a noble experiment. That said, some of the other stuff, A Secret Invasion is probably the worst Marvel thing I've ever seen.
Wow.
Out of everything they've ever done, that may be the worst thing.
And I was already at the point where I had fallen out, feeling like I had to keep up with this stuff, and I didn't even start that one.
Yeah, and you didn't miss anything, Yeah. I think even Loki, I kind of had to nudge you a little bit to watch that, the second season.
Yeah, that's true. Because if Federica had started it up, I might have joined her and watched it, but neither of us were going to do that. So I probably would have just, missed it.
Yeah.
But you nudging me was great because then at the end of the day, I did really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that one worked well because it does kind of, stay in its own lane. It doesn't really, it's not essential viewing, but I think it's meaningful because we know the character.
It also, specifically that one, Loki, did feel like it had urgency for that character. Yes. And, it wasn't like it ended and it's like, well, to be continued next season. And it's just going to keep going and going and going. Right. Like it felt like it was heading somewhere. Mm-hmm. And by the end of it, I felt satisfied with where it had gone. And I don't know that they all felt like that.
Well, I think this is the problem, right? Because we've got WandaVision, which I liked. I thought it was a good show. However, in leading into Doctor Strange, it had basically, it feels like the two ends of the the discourse weren't connecting with each other, because where WandaVision ends doesn't line up with where Doctor Strange starts
Mm.
in terms of Wanda, right? And then
Mhm.
you've got the what was it, Falcon and Winter Soldier, which again I liked it.
Mhm.
Did it feel necessary? Not really,
No.
because this next movie that they have coming out, that has Sam as Captain America, and where Sam ends Avengers Endgame is effectively as Captain America.
Right.
So it's like treading water, right? So that's the problem with this pre-established characters. And then you have the problem of introducing new characters who people are expected to catch up to, right? So that's at least partly, I would guess, why the Marvels didn't play,
Mm.
because people didn't watch Ms. Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was thinking, because they got this Agatha Harkness show with
Yeah.
with Catherine Hahn, who love Catherine Hahn.
Mm-hmm.
She was delightful on the show on the
Uh-huh.
WandaVision. Do we want to watch a whole series about her?
Even when that was announced, I was like, I would love to hear someone explain that to me.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I mean, it just felt very, very. Maybe it's like the hubris was taking over. Like we'll make, no matter what we make, you'll show up.
That's right.
And again, no, it's to say nothing against Catherine Hahn or that character, because the character was fun color, when in the other show. But like, I definitely don't feel the need to see what that's about, to
Right.
be honest,
Right.
I don't know. It felt like they were getting a little high on their own supply.
Well, and again, if we point to the Marvels, as a film which you and I both gave a thumbs up to, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Not their best. Definitely not bad. Like
Yeah.
it was a totally fine movie.
I totally agree. But other than Captain Marvel, you had Monica Rambeau and Ms. Marvel, both characters introduced on television and
Right.
expected to bring momentum to the movies, and that didn't pay off.
Mm-hmm.
So then, yeah, you have to adjust. I think increasing the scarcity is absolutely a good thing. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how evergreen a brand it is. If too much of it, eventually people get tired of it.
Yeah.
Or if not tired of it, they feel like, well, I'll get to it when I get to it.
Mm-hmm. And then that means, 7 times, 8 times out of 10, you're not getting to it.
You're never going to get to it. Yeah. I'm still planning at some point to watch Mandalorian season 3.
So am I. Will I get to it? I have no idea.
I saw somebody online posted, I'm calling it right now, Acolyte Episode 5, The Return of the Mandalorian.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. We've seen that play before.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Doesn't matter if it's Star Wars, Star Trek, you name it. It's just, and this is why, I look at like the James Bond franchise,
mm-hmm.
and the tight grip that Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson keep on those films, and you realize the wisdom of it, because a James Bond movie comes out every whatever it is, however many years, and it's always an event,
mm-hmm.
because that's the only place you're getting that. Right. And Amazon is going to try every which way to try to squeeze more drops out of that stone. And it's like, no, leave it what it is.
Oh, they want a series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, it's hard to do, but there's value in that, in making it something scarce, because otherwise it just loses its the draw of like, oh, here's something I'm not getting anywhere else.
Right.
But with that, we will be back in about a month or so. We'll be talking about Deadpool, which is the only MCU movie this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I expect we'll have lots to say about that whenever that gets here. And by the way, people may not realize this. You and I have been slowly working our way through the Infinity Saga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're getting there, and we managed to hopscotch over Iron Man 3.
Huh.
And I'm like, well, we should address that. We should, next MCU movie comes out, we got to watch Iron Man 3.
I'm down.
It's been a minute since I've revisited that one.
Same. I don't remember it, but I know that was the Shane Black one. So
that was the Shane. And if I'm honest, I'm missing Tony Stark a little bit.
Yeah.
I love that Downey. He was interviewed by somebody, I can't remember who, and they were like, "Oh, would you ever come back?" And he's not even shy about it. He's like, "I would happily come back."
Yeah. Well, and Iger said in his call also that they're heading toward more Avengers,
Mhm.
which we're extremely excited about. And I wonder what that means. I mean, I have to assume he's thinking we're getting some of the old band back because that worked in the past.
Yeah.
Hell or high water, we'll figure out how to do it.
I mean, obviously, like textually, Tony Stark should stay dead.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think you undo that. I think, but I don't think that rules out the possibility of seeing Downey back in some form.
Yeah, you hate to undo it because there's so much weight to it.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a version of it. Maybe he's in some sort of multiverse sort of version where he can be helpful, but he can't come and join you. He has to stay.
I mean, dude, Avengers Endgame is literally about them going back in time and interacting with, characters who aren't around anymore. So you can always find a way to do that. So I'm not opposed to that by any means.
Yeah.
But hey, let's take another short break and then we'll talk about the top release in theaters right now. And we are back, and you know who else is back, Brian?
Who's that, Zachy?
Why, it's stuntman turned bounty hunter Colt Seavers.
Ah, now where do I know him from before?
Why, from the beloved (?) 1980s action series The Fall Guy, starring Lee Majors.
Who Marge Simpson is quite the fan of.
and can you blame her?
No.
Now, the Fall Guy is a film. I have to say, this is a film that has been in development in some form for a long time.
It makes sense. I mean, as you say, show going back to the 80s.
I mean, I remember at one time, The Rock was attached. Then again, The Rock was probably attached to everything at some point.
Yeah,
but I think Martin Campbell was in the mix.
Ooh.
However, the version that made it to theaters is directed by David Leitch, he of the John Wick films. And it stars Ryan Gosling as Colt Seavers, and it has the distinction, The Fall Guy, of being the lowest opening first weekend of May release since the mid-90s.
I knew it was it opened a little weak, but I did not realize it was record setting like that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's kind of an embarrassing record, but against a budget of almost $150 million, it opened to $28 million. So that means that this movie will not see profit theatrically.
Whew.
It will rely entirely on word of mouth to carry the day. However, I think word of mouth will be pretty good because this is a movie I thoroughly enjoyed. I think it knows exactly what it's doing. It is, and I don't mean this in a diminutive way. It is a check your brain, enjoy your popcorn kind of movie. But I laughed a lot. I was engaged. I found Ryan Gosling completely charming. I thought Aaron Taylor Johnson. This was one of the few times where I found him appealing as just a presence. He tends to be kind of a void for me.
That's funny because he plays such an unappealing guy.
Yeah, but he was amusing to watch. I think that, and I'm not an expert on the television show. I did watch it. This is pretty far removed from the show. And I kind of wish it was closer to the premise of the show, but that doesn't diminish what I think is a fun time at the movies. I think people who go looking for an escape for a couple of hours, I think it's a throwback in the best way. I think it's just a lot of fun.
I totally agree. This is just like a good old-fashioned rock'em sock'em romp at the movies.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally what this is. Like, it's just Ryan Gosling is like affable and charming and an underdog, and he's scraping his way trying to win back the woman he loves while he's doing these amazing stunts in a plot that's so simple, but
Mhm.
it good. It doesn't need to be complicated. You know what I
That's right.
mean? It's just it feels so old fashioned in that way, and I think that's what makes it so great. It kind of makes me sad that it didn't do better, because I feel like this is the thing that people seem to say that they want to see again.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder what kept people away. Like, I mean, is it the premise? I've heard some people say that they didn't think the trailers were very good. I can't really speak to that. I thought they were fine, but I don't know. Is it because it wasn't very high concept? Is it because people will wait to watch it at home? I mean, because this is a movie you do want to see on a big screen, because it's action packed. It's celebrating stuntmen. So obviously it's filled with really crazy, larger than life stunts. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm with you. I think this is going to have good word of mouth, and I hope then that gives this longer legs. Because
Right.
I've said that in past episodes. It seems like these days we're seeing movies have legs again in a way that they haven't in a while.
That's true. I mean, apropos of nothing, but I happened to look at the box office of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and what I've been noticing is that the drops have been after the first 2 weeks, it started dropping at around like 30% or so, which is like really good. Right. And so it's held steady. So I mean, again, it's gonna, I think, top out less than the previous one, but it's not a disaster, right? And so I see this one having a similar fate. However, I can't help but look at that $150 million budget, and I'm just like, why on earth would you spend that much money on a movie like this? Like, what is the factor that would tell you that's a good investment? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're taking the thought right out of my brain, because we talked about that with Ghostbusters, where I was saying, I know this, the heads of the studios would balk, but like, not every movie has to make $1 billion. So realistically, think about who your movie is aimed toward and spend accordingly, and still have a success. You know what I mean? So like with Ghostbusters, they don't need to be $200+ million movies. Make them for like 80 or 70 or something like that, and reap your rewards. And I feel likewise, I think they overspent a bit on this one.
Yeah.
I think 100 might have been adequate. Maybe even 90,
Ghostbusters cost 100, Frozen Empire. This cost 150.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. I want these movies to continue to exist, and I think it's worth them continuing to exist, because they go to streaming eventually and they find their audiences there. But it's been proven that the movies that have been released theatrically first, for some reason, for audiences at home, do carry a bit more value or cachet or something that makes them more likely to tune into it. So I think there is still some importance with putting out a movie theatrically.
Yeah.
I just think, let's take a step back. I'm sure even with this movie, the budgeting was probably a little bit of old world thinking a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I hope studios now will take a step back, rethink their Excel spreadsheets with the budgets, and be like, all right, this realistically could probably leg out to something like this. This will do well on streaming. Let's spend this, be happy with what it makes in theaters, and know it'll have a long life in streaming as a movie that people love.
I'm just picking up on what you're saying. Like, I wonder if, this is where the release calendar is really, it's like a game of chess sometimes, and for the last 20 plus years, just about every opening weekend of May has been a Marvel movie. Almost, with a few exceptions here or there. And there's sort of an expectation people have based on that, And I think about that, and I'm like, if you kicked this movie down to beginning of June, would it have done better?
I think that's a great point. Actually, that was something I had been thinking about, because, everyone's saying this is a limp kickoff to the summer. And it's like, well, this isn't the movie you usually kick the summer off with, right? I mean, this is a movie that's starring adults doing kind of adult things. They're not playing with lasers and crazy hi-fi or high concept sci-fi stuff. So you can't imagine that this is going to be like a high draw thing for teenagers. Maybe they'll hear it's fun and they'll show up. But yeah, I feel like maybe some unfair expectations were put on this movie. And to your point, putting it on this date to kick off the summer, it had everything working against it almost in a way.
Yeah, but again, I mean, like to me, the size of the opening weekends is people just weren't like nobody showed up,
Yeah.
Like it's not even like relative to budget, it's a disappointment, but a lot of people turned up. No, it's concerning.
That's true. I mean, they were predicting, I think it was what, 30, mid-30s?
Right.
And it still came in below that. So yeah, that you can't argue with that.
Yeah, I also think going back to what you were saying before about other factors, I think Ryan Gosling is just not a draw.
Yeah, he's beloved, I
Right.
think, but is he going to pack a theater? Maybe
Right.
it depends on what he is involved in,
I mean, I think he's good. He's value added.
Yeah.
But I mean, how many flops, like big budget flops, has he anchored? A lot. Right? I mean, Gangster Squad. What's another one? Blade Runner 2049. I mean, and that's not, I mean, I love Ryan Gosling. I think he's a great actor. And I will generally like every movie he's in. I tend to enjoy his work in it. Right? So he's a great actor. However, this isn't the 90s anymore. We don't have those old-fashioned movie stars anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate admitting it, but this isn't a property anyone's familiar with.
Right. I mean, it's no, that's exactly right. And I mean, to their credit, it's not like the movie was leaning hard on nostalgia. I mean, it was selling itself as something brand new.
Yeah. Like a new franchise with an original playground.
Right.
Stuntman as action hero, know? But getting back to the movie itself, I think what they set out to do with this, the take, was so much fun. I love that he's not an expert at everything.
Absolutely.
Because, if The Rock was in this, he'd be succeeding every step of the way.
Right.
But Ryan Gosling's character, as a stuntman, he may know how to take a hit or a tumble safely. But when he's out in the world trying to solve a mystery, he's not a super spy. He's a scrappy guy just trying to spirit and gum his way through everything. And that's the fun and that's the charm of it.
I agree. Yeah. It's funny because the one thing I found unbelievable, and you tell me this like stuck out to me. There's a scene early on where the Ryan Gosling, Colt Seavers, he's back on set after it's been a minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's performing this stunt, and Emily Blunt, who she's the director of the film, and he had a relationship with her. She's giving him direction in terms of what the character is going through, but she's actually talking to him like in code about their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody on the set knows what she's referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the most unbelievable part of the movie for me. I was like, as the director of the film, why would she open herself up like that in front of the entire cast and crew for the sake of making this point? Like it damages her position as the director. I'm curious what you think about that.
That's so funny you say that. I agree, but I just thought it was, actually I do remember having the feeling that they should have cut it in half.
Yeah, I would agree.
That moment went on for a while, and I did think it was funny. Oh, I don't want to spoil, but the people, the other crew members have reactions to it,
right?
And I thought the one crew member's reaction to it was pretty funny.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that's interesting. I can't say that I thought about it too much, and maybe to be fair, I did have a couple thoughts where this character that Emily Blunt's playing, she went from being a camera operator to directing this big budgeted sci-fi movie within a year.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, okay, turn that off. Like you know what I mean? So I think I just kind of ignored
but to be fair, that sort of ends up being a result of certain machinations.
That is true. That's very true.
Yeah, and that's a very small thing, by the way. Just to be clear, that I'm not like, and that ruined the movie for me. I'm on board with all the stunts and everything else, but that one thing, I was like, that feels like in defiance of normal human behavior.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of scenes like that. There's the scene where wait, should we do the spoiler thing?
We might as well.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
There's the scene with where he's sneaking into the trailer to let Emily Blunt know that he's still alive.
Right.
And she basically fights him for like 5 minutes. And I was like, dude, that could be like someone who works with you. Like,
right.
yes, they startled you, but they are in costume. They clearly belong here. But she had this like Jason Bourne 5-minute fight scene with him. And I assume it's because she probably was like, well, I want like a choreographed stunt.
Oh, interesting. How funny.
I know that was a scene that played like a little funny to me, but
I mean, these are small things. I think that the sort of the general caper vibe and the fact that the actual central plot, that drives the thing. I mean, it felt like something out of a 1980s TV show.
Totally. And also I love at the core of it, it's a love story.
Mm-hmm.
He cares so much about Emily Blunt's character, and he's willing to go through all of this to make sure that she gets her big break, that her movie succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that scene where he's gonna miss karaoke, even though he said he would be there, which he knows will hurt her, but he's going to miss it in the name of trying to help her, to save her movie.
Yeah.
And I really felt that. I really felt the anguish of him not being there, her being like, oh, great, he didn't show up. But he's in the middle of this crazy action set piece, all because he loves her, because he's trying to save her movie. I love that the story had a heart to it.
I agree with that. Yeah. I think that when the movie started, in my head, I was like, first of all, the way the movie started, I was like, okay, they better have the classic theme music over the closing credits.
Okay.
So as soon as the closing credits started and we started hearing that music, I was like, okay, good.
Yeah.
And then I was like, we better get a Lee Majors cameo before this thing is done.
Right.
And then he shows up at the end. So I was like satisfied just for those two reasons. I was like that. Okay, good.
What's funny? I wish I could cite the source where I saw this, but I had it in my head when I went to watch the movie, where they were saying that mid-credits scene where you do see Lee Majors, and I'm sorry, I don't know her name, but the woman from the show also.
Oh, right. Yes, Heather Thomas.
Yeah, and it was sort of a weird, it wasn't like post the story what was taking place in that moment. It felt like a cut scene from the movie that led to the ending that we got, where Jason Momoa has replaced Aaron Taylor Johnson, and someone was speculating that maybe that cameo didn't land for enough people
I believe that.
To make to stop the movie on that and be like, and have not enough people understand it.
Yeah.
So it was fun, but it did feel a little almost like Tarantino'd, like we were seeing the middle of the movie and the end of the movie.
It's the old the 18 movie that they did back in 2010. That happened there too, where you had cameos by Dwight Schultz and Dirk Benedict, who played Murdoch and Face in the old series, and those were cameos that were very clearly meant to exist within the context of the film, but they were inserted into the mid-credit scene, just like this. And I think probably for the exact same reason that you're citing.
Yeah. But I mean, sadly, I'm glad they did it.
Yeah, but sadly, 80s TV ain't the wellspring of nostalgia it used to be.
I mean, I remember the title of this show, but I can't say I've ever seen an episode.
I mean, I've said for years that it's a great concept for a movie, and I'm surprised it took them this long. And again, this has very little to do with what the show did, but I mean, the idea of a guy who's a stuntman by day, bounty hunter by night, that's a show. That's a great movie, So regardless of how we got there, I'm glad they got there eventually, even though I guess it'll probably be a one and done.
Yeah. I feel bad. I was expecting to just come in here and be like, it's fun. It's sort of like you said, check your brain at the door. You'll have a good time.
Yeah.
I have one more to pick.
Okay.
This might have to do, I guess, with modern filmmaking, but I kind of hated that during some of the stunts, particularly when he's hanging onto that dumpster on the back of the truck.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell sometimes real life from CG.
I totally agree. Yep. Because at the end, during the end credits, they show like the reel, when they were filming it. And I'm like, well, I wish I could tell that during the movie that it was real,
Yeah. And I don't know if it has to do with the way movies are treated, color timed, whatever sort of varnish is put over them these days. But him hanging off the edge, or he's hanging onto this dumpster that's hanging off of a truck, and he's like surfing it along like a bridge.
Right.
And I was like, when in Lethal Weapon 4, when Mel Gibson is hanging on.
I was thinking of that.
Almost exactly the same thing. And he's surfing a upside down table and holding on to this truck. And you're like, damn, that guy could die. You know what I mean? Like, but in this, I actually couldn't tell if it was real or if it was composited. And then when you see the, not bloopers, but just behind the scenes of all the stunts that happened during the credits, I was like, oh, so he really did that. And I was like, well, damn. I mean, don't you want to feel that?
Yeah.
During the movie? And so, man, I'm so glad you agree with me. I didn't know if I was going to be on my own with that.
I was literally thinking of that, of Riggs on the table in Lethal 4.
Yeah. Yeah. But on the other hand, there are other stunts that definitely, I mean, like the truck making that huge leap was incredible at the end. And then when he jumps out of the helicopter and does that crazy dive onto the inflated mat or whatever, that was, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it helps. It's very breezy, and Ryan Gosling is just very likable.
Yeah,
as a lead in this type of movie. So it does bum me out a little bit that people didn't turn out, because I do think this is somewhat of a different role for him.
Yeah,
he's usually so like super intense, and this let him kind of goof around a little bit.
Yeah, sort of mix those things in a way. I mean, he's been kind of comedic in The Nice Guys. And, yeah.
There's another one, Brian. Another Gosling flop. I mean,
I know.
Jeez.
I know. But I mean, yeah, all those things aside, buy a big tub of popcorn, sit down. Like you said, check your brain at the door, prepare to have a good time, and just watch people putting on a show for you. Yeah.
I think that's actually a good place to leave this discussion. 2 thumbs up for The Fall Guy.
Yeah,
both enjoyed it. It's a fun time, and despite what the box office might say, I think it's a perfectly cromulent way to start the summer.
A perfectly cromulent popcorn flick.
Exactly. But we will be back next week. We'll be talking about the next big summer movie. I'm excited about this one, Brian. We'll be talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Give me a planet of apes, and I will be there.
I can't wait to talk about it with you, especially.
Yeah, this is a discussion I'm looking forward to having, so we'll be back for that next time. But hey, let us know what you thought of The Fall Guy. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page and message us there, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast. And of course, if you're looking for me online, you can find me on social media at Zacky's Corner. That's at Twitter and Threads and X and Blue Sky and well, no, Twitter is X, but it's still Twitter to me.
I think it is to most.
To most people, yeah. And speaking of Planet of the Apes, if you go to the San Francisco Chronicle, you can see my retrospective on the original 1968 film. That was a lot of fun to write, and I hope people will enjoy checking that out. Brian, what about you? What do you have going on?
As always, Young Jedi Adventures episodes are on Disney Plus and Disney Junior.
There you go. With that, on behalf of my partner, Brian Hall, my name is Zachy Hassan. This has been Movie Film 290, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, folks.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.